Thank you for joining me for the start of my devlog series about Toby's Topsy Tale, a psychological horror 3D platformer. If you want to know more about the premise of the game, you can go back and watch devlog number 0, which talks about the process getting to this point and the overall premise of the game. To make things brief, let me just explain that you play as Toby, a little gingerbread man who explores a hubworld house that leads into little magical worlds. Originally, I was making this game with a partner who dropped off the project. He was going to handle the coding and I was going to handle the art. And now I'm left with handling everything by myself. I decided to start with the basics, taking our main character, Toby, a little gingerbread man, and making a camera move around him. Now, since I don't know anything about coding and the game doesn't require anything too complex, I'm going to be using Playmaker to make the game work. So step 1 is making a capsule collider for Toby. To be clear, I have never used any of these systems before, not Playmaker, not Cinema Machine, not any of this, so I'm starting at ground one. In fact, I've never even gone through the animation workflow, so it's all going to be a learning process. So after I had the capsule collider set up, I set up the camera, which worked perfectly. I'm just kidding, it didn't move at all. So I figured I did something wrong, I went through the settings, I tried again, and nope, it still didn't work. And at this point, I was getting frustrated. This should have been the most basic thing, setting up a camera just to move around the character. Not even movement yet, just the camera. And then I think I realized the problem. Not to throw blame on my ex-partner, because it's definitely possible I was just an idiot, but the small amount of coding that he had sent me for the game, I thought could possibly be messing things up. So I decided to take this opportunity to go ahead and upgrade to the newer version of Unity. So I made a new file, imported Toby, went through the same process to set up the camera, and voila, it worked. It wasn't perfect, but I knew with some fiddling I could get it exactly where I wanted it. So then I decided to move on to movement. And without animations, I used Playmaker to set up a very basic movement set. However, I realized that it wasn't in relation to the camera, so I fixed that next. After that, I also set it up so that when he moves, he turns to face the direction that he's moving. This is called a smooth look at. If the game had any sort of shooting required in it, this system wouldn't work, but for our purposes, this works fine. After that, I decided it was time to set up just a basic jump, and I got it going, I jumped, and I wasn't sure exactly why this was happening, but I figured it had something to do with a vector that I had set up, which basically increases the movement speed down after the jump. I'm pretty sure this was meant to simulate gravity, but what it was simulating was that. I decided to remove this setting, and after that, the jump worked fine. I did eventually come back to this later and fiddle with it a little bit, but basically that's what I did to fix this problem. For my own entertainment, I also fiddled with setting the velocity multiplier to 0.4 to simulate what ended up being a kind of glide effect. However, I did manage to talk myself out of feature creep and decided I did not need a glide in this game, as cool and fun as I think they are. So at this point, I had Toby moving and I had the camera moving around him. It was all basic, but it was essentially what I wanted, just without animations. That being said, he was doing all of this in a blank void, a sample scene. All of the levels I had already created for this game were in the old file from the 2019 version of Unity, and so I went back and exported just the kitchen scene to see how it would transfer. At this point, I had no idea how many errors I was going to face trying to do this, but thankfully when I got the scene in, everything looked perfect. However, because I am hated by God, somehow importing this kitchen level erased everything I had done in the sample scene, meaning the player controller that I had just made for Toby was gone. So I had to recreate everything I had just done, and as frustrating as that sounds, I like to think of it as a learning experience. And it is this optimism alone that maintains my sanity. Now that I had the camera and the movement set up, it was time to tackle the thing that I had been fearing the most: animation. Originally, I had been planning on doing the animations for Toby first, since he's the main character, but then I realized that that is a nightmare and a mistake, so I took one of the little collectible cookies and decided I'll start by making that spin. And believe it or not, somehow I got the process right, and I knew that because when I imported it to Unity, it actually showed that there was an animation attached to the file I had imported. So figuring out the process of importing animations from Blender to Unity, check. Now I had to figure out how to make them function within Unity. I made my first animation controller for the cookie, as you can see here, so that when it starts, it just continually spins. At this point, I thought I had the very basic animation for the cookie working, and I gave it a try. But, like the nightmare that is my existence, of course, it did not work. After trying a few times, I did realize that when you start the game, the animation would play one time, and then stop. And that's when I realized you simply have to hit the loop button in the animation to make it continuously go. And with that, I finally had something animated in this game.
It works! You did it!
I have this little quirk where when I put something new in the game, sometimes I'll just put a bunch of them everywhere to see how they look. So I did that with the cookie, and it was honestly so much fun finally seeing movement in this game. I then followed the exact same procedure to make the coins move, and then I copied them absolutely everywhere and looked around at a world that was alive and moving. Now that I'd spent some time making some things happen in the kitchen, I decided it was time for a change of scenery. And so I imported the fridge level into this project. Now, for some reason when I first imported it, the water shader made it so that everything in the game had their normals flipped. For those of you who don't know a lot about games, normals essentially affect what side of an object you're seeing. So essentially I was seeing every single thing in this level inside out. So I just removed the water shader and everything was working perfectly. Now I had a new level to work in for a little while, which was honestly pretty exciting. My next goal was to make an animation that was a little more complicated. Since I was still too scared to mess with Toby, and I hadn't made anything physical for the game in a while, to work with these animations I would create a new character based on some concept art that I had. So I started modeling the Lovecraftian orb Eligor. My goal was only to create 2 animations, one an idle and the other a hit for when your character collides with him. If you're interested in seeing the whole process just sped up, I did upload a video of that on this channel. So I created the animations and then I imported it to Unity. Using both Playmaker and the animation workflow, I actually got it working pretty well. And now I have a very simple character, fully animated, technically. And that's where I am with this project right now. Some of my immediate future goals at the moment include setting up the camera rig so that it doesn't go through objects, setting up a more complicated character with animations, and hopefully just learning Playmaker and the entire workflow better in general. If you're interested in this project, make sure you subscribe so that you can follow this devlog series and learn other things about the game as we go. If you like this video or you didn't like this video, make sure you like or comment down below to let me know what I did wrong, which I'm sure is a lot because I'm learning. That being said, let me know your thoughts on what you're seeing in the game so far. Thank you for watching and have a very Topsy week. No, cut that. That's really, that's so stupid. Oh, I don't need to sign off.